Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Now, here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. Whether you're tuning in on the radio dial in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM, we welcome you. Or just joining us through one of our online affiliates around the world, we're glad to have all of you with us as well. We're excited to welcome a first-timer to our program today. Alan Mendenhall is here to discuss not only his new book, Bees and Boys, Lines from a Southern Lawyer, but what it's been like for him to share his own love of storytelling with the world and the way that he's been able to see the way that people literally around the world have been responding to his work. Now, this is my first book of Alan's to read, and what's so great about it is I actually mentioned to him that I posted my review on Amazon.com is that it really shows us that all of us not only have stories to tell, but how those stories can benefit others. And sometimes we might get lessons from things that we not even realize can teach us things. We'll talk to Alan about that, what it's been like for him to be present in life and to be able to appreciate those lessons, but also what it's been like for him to share it as well. If you're just so hearing about Bees and Boys, we'll tell you at the end of our segment how you can get your own copy of the book. But Alan, hello to you and welcome to the program.
Hi, Cyrus. Thank you very much for having me.
Really excited to speak with you. This collection of essays, Alan, I think is really powerful. I went into the book not really knowing what to expect, and I think that's a good thing because it kind of made me open to, however this, the book unfolded. What I thought was so great, though, was that even though, each essay kind of took us through different areas or even different subjects, there was a theme there of not only, of course, being aware, I think, of what's going on around you, but also appreciating the lessons that can come from places that we may not even realize can teach us things. What has it been like for you already, Alan, to be able to see the way that people are responding to the new book?
Well, it's been thrilling. I've received nothing but positive reviews so far, and that's been very exciting. When you put your work out there, you never really know how people will receive it. But the interesting thing is I never really wrote these essays for other people. I wrote them mostly for myself. And when I submitted them for publication later, it was obviously to try to reach an audience. But initially, all the essays were written just for myself. It was a way of working through different problems. And I find that when you write, you're able to think through problems in a more cogent way. And so each essay actually began as exploratory, just my way of working through issues.
Right. And I think, too, just like, I realized when I was reading each essay, Alan, is that, even though there may be certain personal things for you, that they definitely have some universal themes. Did you realize that as you were writing it and kind of preparing it for publications, that things that may have seemed like, people may not be able to get anything from, really, I think, had larger themes that we all can understand and appreciate?
I think that's true. I think everybody has thoughts that to some extent could be universalized. I mean, we all have that experience when we read an author and we think, oh, I've thought that before, and I wish I could have articulated it in the way that he did. And I think part of that is the issue of, there's the ancient Greek aphorism, know thyself, but I think that's the most difficult thing in life to do, because if we're honest, we have to admit that we're full of tensions and contradictions, and we're confused, and sometimes we don't know what to think, and we try to figure out what it is that we believe and why it is we believe it, and that's complex. When we make our public face and when we issue our positions on certain matters, we have to have decided by that point what it is I'm going to believe in, and this is who I am. This is representing my innermost thoughts. But deep down, we're probably all like Whitman when he said that do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I'm vast. I contain multitudes. And then there's Emerson, who said, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds." So I think it's sometimes interesting and more profound to explore those ways in which your thoughts aren't always consistent or don't always lead to some obvious conclusion. And I think writing essays is a way of exploring all those competing values and ideas that are that are in that internal mind. And so when you do those sorts of things, you inevitably tap into things that other people have thought about before. And so as for me, that's why I like reading personal essays. And I hope that people will enjoy reading mine as well. But to a certain extent, I couldn't have been aware that I was writing anything that would have, struck other people, because I'm only aware of my own personal experience. But I hope that other people can relate to some of my experiences.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true, especially in the title essay of Bees and Boys, one of the more powerful ones, where you kind of show that really the comparison and how we can be able to look at things like the bees and to be able to learn from them. There was one line from that essay I wanted to share, Ellen, and have us talk a little bit about it. As you're talking
Sure.
about the things that are to be admired from bees, you wrote this, for those who have the print edition of the book. It's found on page 17. If nothing else, I have come to admire bees for their tenacity and courage in the face of insurmountable power. I thought that was an interesting thing, because I think for so many people who have come out of challenging situations, they have become admired by many and an example for many. Talk to us about that admiration and how you kind of were able to see parallels in what people have been able to do.
Well, in some ways that essay is about this sense. So for readers who haven't gotten to it yet, it begins with my brother and me and my friend Jared. But my brother and me played this game where we picked up these red shovels, and we used to just kill bees. And some of the bees, I didn't really know what type of bees they were, but they lived in our swing set. And we used to make bee soup out of them and all these kinds of things. And then with our friend Jared one day, we decided to cover up this hole out of which these yellow jackets were sort of purring in and out. And there was a sense of triumph and self-congratulation and heroism with that act, which was all later turned upside down by a darker and arguably more intelligent force of nature. We weren't aware that bees dig underground tunnels and have a second passageway out. So all we did was anger the bees, and suddenly we were enveloped in this cloud of yellow jackets that were angry and stinging. And what's interesting to me about the yellow jackets is that they are willing, in that moment of defense, to commit suicide in order to save the queen or save their eggs or whatever it is they're doing. I'm not an entomologist. I'm not a scientist. I don't know what the bees are doing. But when they sting you, they sacrifice themselves for some higher purpose. And that, to me, is sort of profoundly disturbing. I'm fascinated with nature. I love nature. I grew up reading Wordsworth and Coleridge and a lot of the British Romantics, but I sort of have a darker view of nature that aligns more with Robert Frost. And he's not going to look at bees, for example, as this gregarious species. He's going to look at some of the deeper, darker forces of nature that maybe we don't understand, and that there's possibility that nature can't be tamed or conquered the way that we thought it could when we were a child. It will retaliate.
Yeah. I think that's it, and I think that's one of the reasons why that essay is one that will definitely remind people of, not of course, the power of nature, but also I think I when I read that essay initially, Ellen, I thought about that all of us could only hope to have that type of tenacity, to be able to not allow situations to kind of bury us. But to be able to find another way. Did you find symbolism in that for yourself as you kind of looked at your adult life and looked at what you've been able to accomplish in spite of the challenges or difficulties you faced?
Well, it's interesting because when I originally wrote that essay, I was just trying to tell a story, and I wrote the first version so that it was pure narrative. And then I had to sit back and think, well, what was the meaning of this? What did I learn? Because I wasn't sure. It was a story that I remembered, and it stuck up there in my mind, and it was a story that I liked to retell to people, and I thought, well, there has to be a reason why this memory stands out. I mean, all our memory is selective. We have so much data coming into our minds, and it's impossible to recall everything. So there had to be a reason why I had selected this story to tell, and I still am not entirely sure I have the right answer to that question, but I sort of hint at it in the essay in different ways, and I'm not sure if the lesson is to be taken from the bees or from the boys, but probably a little bit of both. I mean, there's a sense of humility that that would be not what the children had, but what they had to learn. They had to learn their own powerlessness in the face of something greater, while at the same time the bees also have this sense of powerlessness that they went forward in spite of, and
right.
and were able to ultimately conquer in that moment. But there's still messages in that essay that I'm not fully even aware of, even as the author, that I still haven't fully been able to understand.
Yeah. Well, that brings up an interesting question then, Alan. Do you find then that people do, like I just did with that, do you find that people do break up things from your work, even before Bees and Boys, that are messages or things that you did not consider or even intend when you were writing it or sharing it with us?
I'm sure that's the case. And what's interesting about intent is that sometimes when I've sat down to write, I don't just do it in a giant burst of inspiration where I'm there and all at once everything spills out of my mind and onto the page. I work in fits and starts, and I do a little bit here, a little bit there. I get busy in my everyday working life and come back to an essay. And each time I come back, I may have a different purpose. I may have a different influence. I may be under the spell of a different author. And so there are probably multiple competing influences and purposes within each essay. And at the end, when I finally complete it, they possibly could take you in different directions. I'm sure somebody could read an essay and take one interpretation that's perfectly valid, and someone else could read the essay and take another interpretation that's equally valid, although it might be in tension with the other person's interpretation. So I'd be hesitant to try to pigeonhole any essay into a fixed intent or fixed message. Some of the messages that would come out of it are necessarily those that readers bring to it. I mean, everyone comes to a text with their own experiences, and therefore they get their own message from an essay or from whatever the text may be. I mean, I think reading and writing are both interactive experiences where the writer is imagining an audience, some future audience, and a reader, when a reader is reading the writer, is bringing his or her own past to that text. And so invariably they're going to have different experiences reading the text than the author maybe intended or maybe hoped for.
Right. And I think that's the beautiful thing about words and things like essays like we find in Of Bees and Boys. For those who are just tuning in, either on the radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. We're speaking with Alan Mendenhall today, of course, for our radio audience. Mendenhall is one of the cities, Alan, that our listening audience covers. We're talking about his new book of essays, Of Bees and Boys, Lines from a Southern Lawyer. Another great connection I felt with this book is when you talked about Harper Lee in the book, being from Monroeville. I have family that's there in Monroeville, Alabama now.
Oh, do you really?
So, yeah, I do. So, it's funny, though. Again, like I said, even though this is my first time, reading work of yours or even speaking with you, there are so many things, again, that I felt connections with, as well as I think our audience will as well. Another essay I wanted to mention, and this is an interesting one for me because I think the title will have people thinking one thing, and you go on to talk about something else in the essay. Are Lawyers Illiterate? Is the title of the essay, and it brings up the whole question of what does it mean to be literate. One of the things I think will surprise people, Alan, because I think we all have in our minds what that word means because of the way it's used or illiteracy is used. I mean, talk to us about that essay and what it's been like for you to kind of have that conversation of what it means to be literate and what it doesn't mean.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think I start the essay by talking about the word intelligence and how its signification has changed over the centuries. Milton in Paradise Lost called the eagle and the stork intelligent as seasons. But what he meant was that they were aware of the changing seasons because of their experience. It wasn't that that their intelligence was fixed by biological nature, but that it was something learned, something cultivated. It was not an intrinsic feature of their being. Literate is another word that we use differently now than it used to be used. And there was a definition from a dictionary, I don't remember which dictionary I used, I have to be perfectly honest, that said something like that literacy involves being instructed by letters. It means being learned. It means being well-read. And not just, literacy is the capacity or ability to read. It's much more than that. To be a literate person means that you've read well, you've read widely, and that you can become a cultured person. And I argue in the essay, I guess if you could call it an argument, is that that lawyers are so busy and so consumed in their work that they really are unable to become literate people because there's just not enough time. It takes a lot of time to read books. One thing I did back in, I guess it was like 2007 or 2008, I decided I was going to sit down and start writing out all my favorite books that I had read over the years from childhood on up. And the longer I sat there writing out the list, the more disturbed I became at how short the list seemed. It was very disturbing because I started realizing there are so many books out there, many of them that are just foundational texts of Western civilization and considered classics, that you can't get to them all in a lifetime, and that was very bothersome to me. In 2013, I tried deliberately to pick one canonical text a week and read it, and it was very difficult. When I was in graduate school, I read almost a book a day. That was different. I had a lifestyle in which I was supposed to be studying and supposed to be reading, and I was able to just read voraciously. But then life caught up with me, and I had to try to force myself to read sometimes very difficult texts, as many as I could in a week, and it became impossible to read a book a day because, when you're in the law, you are so involved in your clients' lives, or for a while I worked for a Supreme Court and worked in government as an assistant attorney general, so involved in that kind of work that there was just not enough time to read, and I found that to be the sacrifice of a gift in some ways.
Yeah. There is something, and it just shows again what some will pull from these essays and what others will as well. Alan, one of the big takeaways from me is something that you said that made me kind of think about life. People here in Mississippi, they joke about me being a workaholic and how much time I spend in my work, which to me is exciting because I get to speak to people like you and get to meet a lot of great people. And you talk about, though, what really matters, I think, is one of the big things I took away from this. And I want to read what you wrote. It's on page 34 for those who have the print edition of the book. You say this: "Do not misunderstand me. Working hard and earning profits are not only good and healthy but personally fulfilling, yet they must be supplemented with humane contemplation and the private study of important ideas. Industry and innovation are a requisite to a high quality of life," you write, "to a robust economy and human flourishing, and they make possible the time and leisure that enable some people to create great art and literature. Not everyone can be literate, and that is a good thing." I think the reason why that struck me is because I think we all have our gifts. We all have our thing that we are able to do, and I think we all have our contribution that we will be able to make. How important was it for you, or did you intend even in that paragraph? Because I'll tell you what I took away from it is that don't think that you have to compare your gift or what you are accomplishing to someone else. Was that part of what you wanted to say in that?
Sure, absolutely. I think that's definitely part of it. And I can't recall where I was or what I was thinking at the time when I wrote that particular paragraph, but immediately at the moment I'm thinking of many lawyer friends I have who think that some of my literary interests and pursuits are not very interesting. They have their own interests, and that's okay. We don't all have to be called to literature are called to humane contemplation. I think that we lose a lot if we don't pursue those things, and that, we maybe lack empathy and understanding if we are not immersing ourselves, at least at some point in our lives, in the great ideas and in some of the more timeless questions of human experience. But it's perfectly okay that some people don't want to do that. I mean, if some people want to spend their lives working to create goods that are beneficial to the human condition, that's good too. We need advances in medicine. We need a higher standard of living and quality of life. We need to reduce poverty. And if we all just sat around reading Evelyn Waugh or something, we probably wouldn't achieve those things. So There is a place for everyone, and it's okay that not everyone that loves literature in the way I do. That was something I had to learn as a teacher. I would be very disturbed and bothered when I would try to teach students these books that I just loved and that meant so much to me, and around which I had centered my life, and then to see some student dislike it was not only surprising, but in some ways hurtful. And I wanted the students to feel what I felt when I read those books, or to think the things I thought when I read those books. But not everyone has the same interests, and people who don't lead perfectly productive and constructive lives doing what they are called to do as well.
Right. And I think that's it. One of the great things, I think, too, that you do in this book, Alan, is that you've realized the importance of not taking yourself too seriously. I mentioned to you before we began the segment that one essay that has to do with your committing murder that you tell us about in the book. And wanted to go and share that with other people.
Before I get arrested here.
See, our audience has to go and read the book so they know exactly what I'm talking about. So, yes, I give them that teaser. But Of Bees and Boys is the title of the book of essays that we've been discussing by Alan Mendenhall, Lines from a Southern Lawyer. Alan, really great book, really great conversation. What is your hope? I'll ask you this as our last question. What do you hope when people finish this book, that they not only appreciate about the world around them, but also their contribution to it?
Well, I just hope it gets them thinking about their own lives. I think that in this current age, we're so busy and we're so distracted. There's so much going on the internet and social media that we don't take the time to stop and think about the things that really are important, the things that really matter, as you said earlier. And I just hope that this book will help people to slow down a little bit and take some time to think about their own lives, their own relationships with others, and their own callings and convictions, and to really explore them and ask questions about them, and to know thyself, as we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Well, I think they'll definitely enjoy it. It's a quick read. I think they'll be able to read it many in one sitting, but definitely will want to go back and reflect on them as well as they're able to go through. Again, everyone, Alan Mendenhall has been our guest. So the book is available through our friends at Amazon.com. You all can get it there. As I mentioned earlier, I've already posted my review of the book. You can go there and read my thoughts. And, Alan, how can our audience stay connected with you?
Well, I have a website, alanmendenhall.com. That's ALLENMENDENHALL. And my books are also available there. As you say, my books are available on Amazon. And, just Google my name and see what comes up. I know it'll be different every other month, but I would love to have some followers. That would be excellent.
Well, and congratulations to you on the new book, and thank you so much for the time today. Really enjoyed the conversation with you.
Thank you, Cyrus, and thank you again for having me on your show.
No, the pleasure is definitely all mine, and we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. And if you all came in late, you missed part of the conversation with Alan, don't worry. Thanks to our online friends, you all can catch the replay right after we go off the air. The link is already available through our social media sites, so head over to facebook.com/CyrusWebb or go over to twitter.com/CyrusWebb. If you click on the link there, you can listen to the show completely for free and share it with your friends from there, too. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Make sure you take out time to enjoy some good music, and of course, a great book. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live today. You all make it a great one.